Thank you. The second frame, Sean Murphy to break.
Originating from India in 1875, it's travelled around the world to its epicentre and spiritual home in the Crucible of the Steel City, an aesthetically modest temple where the crackling atmosphere is the stage for our protagonists. Our immaculately dressed lead men of years gone by included Dracula, the Nugget, the Hurricane and the King. Today, the likes of the Jester, the Rocket and the Warrior are the stars of our show. Spellbinding skill and precision is needed to navigate the balk and the baize, but it's not just spells. Be careful, if you win it for the first time, you will be cursed. Cue the World Snooker Championships from Sheffield. This is the Sporting Almanac.
Love it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, and on with the show. Evening, Ben.
Evening, Jack.
How are you today?
Yeah, very good, thanks, mate.
Excellent.
Been a good week. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Also been a good week.
Yeah. And do you want to give us an update from the Masters, since we're right at the start of the show?
Yeah, update from last week's main event. Starting, of course, on Wednesday with the par 3 contest. That was won by Nico Echeverria, but the real star of the show was 4-year-old Poppy McIlroy, who stole the spotlight by sinking a 25-foot putt on behalf of her dad, Rory. The crowd erupted in delight, and the cheers were so loud they overwhelmed little Poppy, who got herself a much-needed hug from Dad. Fast forward to Sunday, it was Rory McIlroy who delivered one of the most compelling victories in Masters history. After leading eventual runner-up Justin Rose by 7 shots at one point, McIlroy's round was a roller coaster, to say the least. Full of brilliance, but marred by costly errors in key positions. Rose superbly clawed his way back to force a playoff, both players finishing 11 under par. But on the very first playoff hole, Rory pulled off a stunning wedge to within 2 feet of the pin. He rolled in the putt for a winning birdie, dropped to his knees in tears, and went straight to his wife and Poppy for an equally much-needed hug before going to get his green jacket. With this long-awaited victory, McIlroy completes his career Grand Slam, joining an elite group of just 6 players now who've achieved the feat, and doing so 11 years after his last major. Gene Sarazen, Ben Hogan, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and now Rory McIlroy. Augusta delivers again.
Thanks for that, Jack. Do you also want to do a further update on the National?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just to be a downer again at the start of an episode, it is some bad news. One of the 2 horses that I mentioned last week, the one that pulled up, it was the oldest horse in the field. Celeb Delen has unfortunately passed away following Saturday's ride at Aintree. 13 years old, the oldest of the 34 runners, as I say, pulled up on the final fence. There are questions being asked, and the jockey has received a 10-day suspension for potentially continuing the race when the horse appeared to have no more to give, but that is an ongoing thing, so we'll let that develop and see if anything comes of that. But as previously and as ever, it is a dangerous race and can have an unhappy ending amongst all the joy and celebration.
Yeah, it's pretty rubbish. It's probably in the interest of balance, it's probably also fair to point out that before the horses run, they don't just get entered into that race. There are a lot of checks. There's a lot of scrutiny. Vets do a series of health checks on the horse, including physical checks when get it to run and check its heartbeat and things like that. So it is pretty unlucky, but the circumstances are obviously tragic and under investigation. So we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, so moving on to this coming weekend, a few upcoming events to get ourselves excited for. Ben, do you want to kick us off? What's coming up this weekend?
Yeah, there's actually a lot on this weekend with it being, is it Easter weekend? Have I got it right?
It is Easter weekend, yeah.
It is Easter weekend. I'm actually going to come and see you here.
You are going to come and see me. Mm-hmm. Next episode might be recorded in person, which is exciting.
Who knows? Yes, so the Women's Champions League semi-finals are on,
nice.
Which is fun. Arsenal are in that, so come on the girls. Playing Lyon, who are very good. So, yeah.
So what you're telling me is Arsenal are going to be in the semi-finals of both Champions Leagues? Is that what you're telling me?
Easy. Hopefully. The greatest Emirates era night at the in the Champions League, I think that. So yeah. Anyway, I'm an Arsenal fan, everyone. So don't judge me for it, but I make no apologies for it either. What else is on? The county championships has started. The domestic county championship in cricket. We missed that. That's because it's starting in April, which is insane. But yes, that's underway. The Women's Six Nations continues, so come on the Red Roses, as previously championed last week. And the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is on, I think.
Excellent.
There is something else on there, isn't there, Jack?
There is something else on, and this is something that, to say I considered it being the main event this week is an understatement. So this will be a controversial one if we ever do end up doing it, given this is a sporting podcast, and it is obviously controversial. But this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, it is WrestleMania. It is the biggest event in sports entertainment in the world, featuring some of the biggest stars of sports entertainment. But obviously it is questionable whether that could be considered true sport, because, as we well know, whisper it quietly, they actually already know who's going to win in advance.
No, what are you saying?
But here's a secret. I love it. I think it's one of the most wonderful forms of entertainment in the world, and I will never change my mind on that. And you can judge me for that one all you want, because I ain't changing my mind. It is they are masters of their art.
Well, the dudes are definitely athletic, even if you don't consider them athletes.
Well, where's the line, ultimately?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, if we're talking athletes, we've got plenty of true athletes for you today in one of the most athletic and demanding sports in the world. Absolutely not said with any sense of sarcasm there, because I love this sport as well. Ben, where are we this week?
We are at the World Snooker Championships in Sheffield.
Yes, the Crucible, the heart of the game of snooker.
Yeah, well, it is literally the beating heart of the game of snooker.
The beating heart, indeed.
I mean, this is a city close to our hearts, though, isn't it, Jack?
It is. It's a city we lived in. Not, I was going to say together, but we're both living in the city at the same time for 3 years. For university back in the day. It is a wonderful city. It's genuinely one of my favourite cities in the world. It has a lot of culture, a lot of history, a lot of hills, which
Seven hills.
Good for the fitness, especially when you're, as we were at that point, possibly imbibing a little too much. It's a wonderful city, and it's a wonderful tournament and a wonderful venue, despite its its age, shall we say, and its appearance. It is one of the great of an atmosphere.
One of the great UK sporting cities, arguably. 2 football teams. I think is it where the British swimming team are based as well?
It is, I believe. There's quite a lot of
Jessica Ennis is from Sheffield, or trained there.
Yep, she is. The legend there is Jessica Ennis Hill.
Good boxing tradition.
Very good boxing tradition. History of cricket as well. Before Yorkshire County Cricket Club moved up to Leeds, it was very heavily built around Sheffield, and the game grew in the north around Sheffield and developed a culture of its own around Sheffield, as very diametrically opposed to the traditional cultures of cricket, which were obviously very upper class and around the public schools. This was the working class development of the game was very much out of Sheffield, but I'm sure we'll come to that at some point.
Yeah, a great city. If you haven't been, go. Basically, you'll have a lovely time. And I think both of us have been to the Crucible. This is one of the events that we're covering that I think we've actually attended as paying patrons.
I have, yeah. I've been to the Crucible. I've been to the UK Championships as well, which is the UK Championships in York, I believe. I've
That's
been
right.
to. I got told off by Ali Carter because my phone went off.
Ali Carter, yeah.
It's completely deserved.
I've been to quite a few snooker events actually, but that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss the event itself. It's a less familiar sport, so is there merit in quickly covering the game itself?
I think there is. I think we've got to assume and hope that we've got some listeners in the United States, for example, who may be less familiar. It is a very British-centric sport and Commonwealth-centric sport. There have been world champions from up until recently. There'd never been a world champion from outside the Commonwealth. It was British, it was Canadians, Australians, but recently there was a Belgian world champion, which I think is a sign that the game is growing. And obviously, as the money develops, the interest in the game will continue to grow. So, all a good thing.
Well, okay. I'll give an overview of the game though. In that vein, it's better than pool. Basically, it's harder than pool. So I'm sorry if you're American and you're listening, but it is. It's just harder. It's better. Pool is an inferior table game to snooker. Snooker has more balls, 21 balls versus 16. Snooker's more complicated in its scoring system. There's different points values associated with each different coloured ball. You have to pot the balls in a specific sequence that you don't have to do in pool. And yeah, there are lots of different strategic aspects to it. It's basically being coin chess, but with balls. It's strategically harder, and the table is comparatively massive.
The table is. For anyone who's played both pool and snooker, I've played pool, obviously. I think most people have played pool. Most common folk like us have played pool more than we've played snooker. The size of snooker tables is insane, and the difficulty of the game compared to it. I took my good friend Roger, who I believe you've met at the wedding. I took Roger to play snooker when we were in Ireland, because golf and snooker he wanted to play, of course, being an American visiting. And we're both okay pool players, not the best, but we're both okay. We were awful. Honestly, snooker is a seriously hard sport.
Yeah, it is. You can go a long time without potting a ball on a snooker table if you're an amateur.
Long, and you can have surprisingly tediously long frames and very low scores at the end of them.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're an amateur, like a break of like 10 is remarkable.
Oh, 10's a game winner.
So yeah, I mean,
these aren't amateurs we're talking about today, though.
No, we're talking about some serious dudes who are extremely good at it, who barely miss. But just to fill in a few more blanks for anybody who's unfamiliar, it's played on a rectangular billiards table covered with a green cloth, which is known as the baize. And it has 6 pockets, like a pool table, one at each corner and then 2 in the middle on either side. The game uses 21 balls, 15 red balls, 6 coloured balls, the yellow, the green, the brown, the blue, the pink, and the black. I mean, arguably there's 22 balls because you have the white cue ball as well. And the goal is to score as many points as you can, but you have to pot all the reds first. But each time you pot a red ball, you then have to nominate a coloured ball and pot that. The coloured ball is then replaced on the table, and once you're down to just the coloured balls, you have to pot them in a particular sequence, which goes yellow, green, brown, blue, pink, and then black. And it's basically 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points in that order. And the players alternate shots. Well, they don't alternate shots, that's not true. They alternate turns at the table, using the cue ball to strike, or an attempt to pot the red ball or a coloured ball as appropriate. And they stay on the table until they miss, basically. And then the other individual is given an opportunity to come to the table and accumulate their own score. And ultimately, it's whoever has the most points at the end who is the winner. It's played over a series of frames, call them games. Think of tennis, effectively. It's a best of, though, so you win one game, it doesn't mean you win the match. You have to win a series of frames, and the number of frames depends on the stage of the tournament, the type of tournament you're in, etc., etc. So it's not that simple. And there's plenty of jargon. The most famous phrase, Jack, you want to take over?
The most famous phrase being "you're snookered," which means I'm going to put it slightly more politely than you've put it in front of me here. But if you're snookered, then it means you're put in a position where it is difficult and challenging to escape from. You can now put your description of it if you like.
It means you're fucked.
Yeah. So when you snook your opponent, you essentially put them in a position where they have to bounce themselves off a bumper or try some sort of trick shot to escape from it. And if they fail to do so, penalty points are awarded to you. So you get 4 penalty points, or more points if they hit a colour. So if they hit the black ball, you get 7 points. If they hit the pink ball, you get 6 points. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. There we go. I do know some rules. But yeah, so it's a deliberate tactic that you can do to snooker someone. It's a good ploy if you don't have an obvious shot to make. It's a good ploy to snooker someone, and then hopefully you'll either get them to put you in a position where you're gaining points because they miss, or they might put you in a position where you have an easier shot next time. So that's the trick.
Yeah, and to be fair, pros, they very rarely are not able to get out of snookers.
Yeah, it's far more likely in that situation that they'll put you in a better position for your next shot rather than miss the snooker itself. But occasionally you do get situations where it's a particularly good snooker, or perhaps an opponent who's under a lot of pressure and they can miss repeatedly. And they miss too many times, I believe they concede the frame as well.
Yeah, that's true, actually. It's a weird sport, basically. I mean, you can. Yeah, there's things called cannons. A kiss is usually a good thing. Double kiss can be problematic. Yeah, it's weird.
It is good though. It's very good background watching. It's very good just to have on in the background on your telly when the snooker championships are on. While you're working on something else, maybe if you're doing your work during the day, working from home, it is a good sport because it's quiet. The fans are well behaved, and occasionally you just see some absolute moments of genius.
Yeah, it's kind of like hypnotic.
It is. It's a good description.
Yeah, it's like an easy watching.
Yeah, you can be there for very long sessions. Like when we've been to the events, you can be there for quite long sessions that should be quite hard work to sit through. But it's a bit like being at the theatre. You know, like every moment is quite engrossing, and the sort of concentration required from yourselves. It's probably why I got distracted and ended up going on my phone and annoying Ali Carter that one time. But we digress. Sorry, Ali.
There's a lot of suspense and anticipation because the shots. There's a lot of anticipation because there's a lot of not waiting. That's a different way of putting it. But the players obviously are lining up shots frequently, but they do take a little bit of time sometimes. So you're sort of constantly anticipating something. But what you're anticipating is usually quite a suspenseful moment because it's very rare that the pot is easy, particularly long shots on a snooker table. So, yeah, if we're trying to sell it, sort of stick by it for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and you'll see what we're getting at, I think.
Yeah, it's very exciting when someone's building a big break as well. So that's when you're building your scores. That's your score in a single turn, essentially, is your break. And if someone's building a big score, getting up towards a century break, which is considered a very good thing, and the maximum break you can get is a 147 or 147, which is when you go red, black, red, black, red, black, red, black, all the way, and then clear up at the end of it. And it's rare. It's very rare. We'll come to that later.
Yeah. Well, we've been trying to sell the game, so maybe we should, rather than focusing on the game itself in the abstract, focus in on the tournament.
Yes.
Cover a little bit
of involved.
There is some money involved. You'd be surprised by how much money is involved.
Yeah.
Well, the World Snooker Championship is the longest running and most prestigious tournament in professional snooker. So that's your starting point. It's also the richest, which is Jack's point. How much do people make, Jack?
So the total prize pot is £2.3 million. And in 2023, that included £500,000 for the winner, which is about, $750,000? Somewhere around that mark. So a good whack of money.
That is a good whack of money for 3 weeks.
What is essentially a pub game mainly only played in Britain.
And not too long of work. Well, I say not too long work. I'm doing them a disservice, actually, because the games can go on forever.
The prize money has gone up a lot. Like, I need to check the numbers, but even when Alex Higgins won his first tournament in 1972, more on him later. I think he won. It was maybe £1,000 or something like that. By the time he won it in 1982, it was £25,000, and then obviously now it's £500,000. So I'm sure you can. There is obviously some inflation involved, but there has been a huge swell in prize money, and that is because of television popularity. It is a very popular sport on television, and therefore with advertisers.
It's because of the demographic. It's got a wide demographic as well, which maybe not all sports attract in the same way. Young people and old people and everyone in between like a bit of snooker on the TV. But yeah, first held in 1927, this tournament, not under its current auspices, but nonetheless effectively started then and continued to the modern day. There were no tournaments during World War II, well, between 1941 and 1945 specifically.
Good excuse?
Yeah, good excuse. And then between 1952 and 1963, it also didn't take place, but that was because there was a dispute between the Professional Billiards Players Association and the Billiards Association and Control Council.
It's a less good excuse.
Yeah, I don't even know who they are or what they do. But yeah, it was revived again in 1964, and then the modern era, as it's become known, began in 1969 when the tournament reverted to a straight knockout. It used to be like a league table of sorts.
It was... For a while in the 60s, when it was a challenge tournament in the 60s, it was literally the previous winner would be challenged by someone.
Winner stays on.
Yeah, it was winner stays on, essentially. And then, but there was sometimes 2 or 3 tournaments a year, or 2 or 3 games a year. So the champion would get challenged, and it would be like a best of 127 frame event. So just to put in context, I think current finals are best of 35, and they go on for quite a long time. They go over a couple of days sometimes. If they
it's
go
4
the distance.
sessions, isn't it? If it goes distant.
Yeah. So best of 127 was you'd be there for 5 or 6 days, especially if it was close.
That's attritional.
That's what it used to be. So it's a very different tournament for them, and you did get multiple winners, obviously, because winner stays on. That's an inevitability. It is the modern era is considered since 1969, and I think generally when you considered sort of the greats of the game and taking into account multiple winners, I think 1969 is a good place to start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken place annually since 69. Every championship since 1977 has been at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, which we'll come on to in a little bit more in a little while. Still held there today. Played in a format that's largely unchanged since 82, which is 32 players reach the Crucible. Top 16 in the world rankings that year qualify automatically, whilst another 16 players win their places through qualification tournament. That qualification tournament...
Massive qualification tournaments.
Exactly. It's not always been like that, though. I think that's quite a fairly recent development, isn't it? The expansion of it.
The sport is growing. The competition hasn't. I suspect you're going to see it go to 64 players, or at least 48 players or something like that, and the actual tournament itself grow, perhaps, in the future. But yeah, for the time being, it is growing more popular, obviously, with the amount of money in the game. It is going a bit more global as well. As I mentioned, there was a Belgian winner a couple of years ago, which is, it sounds like nothing, but that is a huge deal because it's been such a sport which is dominated by British players and then obviously Australians, Canadians as well. But yeah, the game is expanding. There's quite a lot of players from China and Hong Kong now. It is, yeah, it's a growing sport, so the qualification tournament has to grow because the actual tournament itself hasn't for, as we say, for over 30 years at this point.
Yeah, it's
40 years. Over 40 years.
You were talking about Luca Bracel there, weren't you?
Yes.
Has there been an Asian winner? Ding Junhui ever won it?
I don't believe he's ever won the World Championships. I believe that Luca Bracel was the first outside the Commonwealth to win it. Although you're making me second guess myself, Ben.
Whilst you're having a quick look, should probably add that only 3 qualifiers have ever won the tournament. Alex Higgins, who you mentioned earlier, in 1972. Terry Griffiths in 1979. And Sean Murphy, surprisingly, in 2005, which I didn't realise Sean Murphy was a qualifier when he won it. And the final point to make about the tournament itself is probably that it's basically one of 3 majors in snooker, which includes the UK Championship and the Masters, and they together make up the Triple Crown series. And that's sort of the holy grail of modern snooker. But yes, any update on whether or not we've ever had an Asian winner?
So no, we have never had an Asian winner, but when I say that he was the first player from outside the Commonwealth, I was technically incorrect because in 1997 Ken Doherty won, and Ken Doherty is Irish. The Republic of Ireland is not in the Commonwealth. So what I should say is the first non-British or Irish or Commonwealth winner was Luca Brissell in 2023.
Good clarification. That's interesting that there hasn't been an Asian winner, because it is very big in China now.
It is, and there has been an Asian runner-up. Ding Junhui, as you say, was runner-up in 2016, and I believe he may have also won the Masters previously, which is one of the majors.
He's a good player.
I know he's reached the final twice, but he's never won that either. But nevertheless, very good player.
Yeah, Ding Junhui is a good player. That's surprising. So that's the tournament. Its venue, well, in British sport, it's pretty iconic. It's synonymous with the game. Basically, think Wembley and football, Twickenham and rugby, although they're trying to make me call it the Allianz. I shan't.
No, I agree.
Centre Court and Wimbledon, Lords and cricket, the Crucible and snooker.
Yeah, so this is something I've been thinking about, because it's not something that is common in American sports, because I'm a big follower of American sports, if anyone hasn't noticed that yet. It's not, you don't have like a home of the sport so much in America. The closest you get probably is like Madison Square Garden is synonymous, of course, with basketball, but so are many other venues around the country, and the Super Bowl is obviously held at a different place every year, and the other finals are held at the home stadia of the 2 teams involved across the series. So you don't have the sort of synonymous stadium. So obviously Wembley Stadium is where the England football team play. It's where the FA Cup final is held. We'll be back there in a few weeks. It's quite it's not a British thing, but it's quite a sort of a thing that differs from American sport. Australia, you can make the argument as well. They've got the MCG, obviously, synonymous with cricket, and India obviously have some similar things with cricket. But Twickenham, Wimbledon, Wembley, Lords, the Crucible. Yeah,
the Crucible. It's, as we were saying earlier, in the heart of Sheffield. It's literally the heart of Sheffield. It's round the corner from the town hall. It's
you can stumble in there, and I think we probably have at some point.
And it's a Grade 2 listed building, which means that it's a structure of particular architectural or historic interest deserving of special protection. Yeah, and according to the Historic Buildings and Monuments Commission in England, Grade 2 means it is a building of special interest based on a criteria that assesses age, aesthetics, and national interest, amongst other things. Did you know that?
I'm glad you're throwing a bone. Having thrown a bone to the farmers and horticulturalists last week by talking about grass, to the architects this week, it's very kind of you to consider everyone.
Yeah, well, these are the fine details that you get on the almanac. So, we'll keep them coming. When was it opened? It was opened in
1971. It was opened, Ben. So it was named after Crucible Steel, which, if anyone knows anything about Sheffield and steel are synonymous with one another. Mm-hmm. It's produced in Sheffield from 1740 and drove the industrialisation of the city until it was one of the economic centres of the UK. And ultimately, for anyone who's watched the full Monty will know this, that then took a downturn once the steel plant shut in the 80s and 90s, and the city is recovering, and it is a lovely, wonderful city, but it had a few lean years. Obviously, that was such an essential part of the city's working class culture, and the obviously money it provided to the workers was essential.
Yeah,
the work
powerhouse of the Industrial Revolution, basically, wasn't it? Sheffield.
Good way of putting it.
But it's it's an iconic building. It's predominantly, because it's a theatre, not used for snooker, but for the usual sorts of shows and events that you get at a theatre, plays, dances, musicals, etc., etc. And the sports journalist Peter Mason of The Guardian has, and I think he summed it up quite nicely actually, he argued that whilst the physical aspects of the Crucible are greatly underwhelming, which I think
it is true.
Yeah, that's true. What it's lauded for is its atmosphere,
Yes.
and it's because the audience sits on three sides, obviously, like most theatres, I guess. Well, actually, that's not true. It effectively surrounds what would be the stage, and that's the same with the snooker. It's quite claustrophobic, would be doing it a disservice. It's how would you describe it, Jack? It's like
intimate. I would say it's intimate.
Yeah,
it's a good word.
That is a good word.
Yes.
No member of the audience is more than 20 metres away, basically, from the performers. And it can only seat 980 people, but it's that closeness that I think generates its unique atmosphere. Crackles.
Yeah, it's not an event it's an event that makes a lot of money, but it's not an event that makes a lot of money from selling tickets, which it also doesn't charge. Well, I don't know what it charges now. It's been a few years. It didn't charge a huge amount for tickets when we went, certainly.
No.
And the main money it makes is from TV revenue and sponsorship, and it does have a history of sponsorship through tobacco. Historically, it was very heavy in the sponsorship. Obviously, that's no longer a thing.
What else is there to say about the venue? It's, in terms of its size and stature, I guess a good illustration of how big it is that in the early rounds there are 2 games going on simultaneously in the auditorium, and then the later rounds the theatre converts into a single arena. And so there's like a dividing board so that, they can basically sell tickets for 2 different games. But if you wanted to, actually, on that point quickly, there's a really sweet spot though, where if you're on like the dividing line, you can watch both games, it certainly was that way when I went. I'm sure it probably still is. And if you want an illustration of the significance of the venue to snooker, I think this sums it up perfectly, actually. The Crucible itself went through a renovation in 2007, 2009, £15 million refurbishment. And during that period, it was shut for the entire period, except for the 2008 and 2009 World Snooker Championships. They made the exception.
It means as much to the championships as it does to the city. They are synonymous with one another, and long may that continue. 2007, 2009, that's when we were in Sheffield.
Yeah,
many a moon ago. Yeah.
But yeah, it's also does host other sporting events. It has held table tennis and squash, and it used to host the World's Women's Snooker Championship between 1998 and 2003, but I think that had some financial challenges, and eventually it was withdrawn and taken elsewhere. And plans are afoot. I think it's Barry Hearn who's the boss.
Certainly.
Yeah, he wants to build a venue next door by the same name, but attached by a bridge. So I presume, increasing capacity, etc.
Yes, I imagine increased capacity, increased vendors, increased anything that can make a bit of money for Barry. I would imagine he's good at that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the tournament. That's the venue. It's got a rich history, which we flirted with earlier. Do you want to take us through any of that, Jack? Any particular things that jumped out at you as being noteworthy?
Yeah. So obviously, as we say, it's what we consider the modern era is from 1969 onwards, but the tournament's been going on since the 20s, and from 1930, the final was played at Thurston Hall in Leicester Square in London. So between 1935 and 1940, virtually all matches were played consecutively at that venue. But that was unfortunately brought to an abrupt end in October 1940 by the Luftwaffe during the Blitz. Thurston Hall was destroyed by a parachute mine, which was known as a Luftmine, dropped by the Luftwaffe. Makes sense. Which is essentially a naval mine which is dropped from an aircraft by a parachute. So these bombs were mostly used in the Second World War by the Luftwaffe, but they were occasionally used by Bomber Command of the RAF as well. HMS Belfast, if anyone's been to London, which is now docked at the Thames near Tower Bridge, was in fact damaged by one during the war. And the bomb that hit Thurston Hall damaged the southwest corner of Leicester Square and obviously the hall itself, so no tournaments were played during the remainder of World War II. The final return to the then rebuilt venue in 1947. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
we've got it in. We got the war in again.
We got the war in again.
That's 3 for 3, baby.
I think that'll be it for this episode, but got to keep the streak going. So just in case, and this is something that how British people are inclined to perhaps criticise American sports for constantly calling their competitions the World Series or saying they're world champions when they've just beaten a team from, Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
This tournament obviously was largely contested by British people and Irish people, the occasional Australian, Canadian, but just to defend ourselves and to make it actually sound slightly like a world tournament. The 1970 World Tournament, which was actually played in 1970, but we digress, and the 1975 tournaments were held in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne in 1971 and 1975 respectively. So there you go. It is somewhat a World Championships, and as I mentioned, obviously, it is becoming more global nowadays, although still dominated by British, Irish players and Australians and Canadians.
To be fair, mate, you couldn't get further around the other side of the world. So
than Sydney and Melbourne, no, absolutely not.
We've dispelled that myth. So if there are any Americans who are chomping at the bit to criticise, you can stop right now. You have no legs to stand on. It's a truly global sport.
There's sometimes a Canadian team that plays in the World Series, so
your neighbours don't
often
count. Come on.
just because our empire went all the way to Australia means okay, whatever you say. So
let's leave that there. Let's leave that there before we upset someone.
Well, we're running a tight line with Australians so far after episode 1, and then Greg Norman episode 2. I actually might mention Greg Norman again in this episode, so we'll look forward to that. So there's 2 occasions, as I mentioned, it's been held outside the UK, but it's been held at some glamorous venues inside the UK, including Birmingham, Manchester, and the wonderful city of Middlesbrough as well.
Yeah, Middlesbrough's niche. That's niche.
It is niche. Oh, fair play. There we go. There's the tournaments. I think we've got a few records to share, a few champions to share. Ben, you want to take over?
If you've got that kind of long-standing history and that diversity, as we've now clearly demonstrated, going all the way around the world, you can imagine some records have been racked up in that time. We're going to focus in on the modern era, because before the modern era, it was, as Jack said, it was just dominated by a couple of English lads, basically, who were just playing each other on repeat, it seemed. But there were 28 champions since 1969. Most wins, Stephen Hendry and Ronnie O'Sullivan, both got 7 each. We'll come on to both of those characters in a little bit. Hendry is also the youngest champ ever at 21, and O'Sullivan the oldest at 46, which I kind of like that. I don't know why. That just jumped out at me as being kind of nice. Joint titles, one's the youngest, one's the oldest.
I didn't know O'Sullivan was so old even now. He seems like he's got a bit of a Peter Pan complex about him. It's amazing to think he is that old.
Yeah, no, that's true, actually. He's a bit like Paul Rudd. Yeah, O'Sullivan has the most appearances as well, 32. And then you've got a series of other multiple champions. So Ray Reardon and Steve Davis have got 6. And then there is a gap. No one's got 5, but John Higgins and Mark Selby have 4 each. And there are a couple of other multiple winners, including Mark Williams on 3. And the reoccurring, in this podcast at least, Alex Higgins, who has 2.
The impossible to not mention Alex Higgins, yeah.
Yeah. There have only been, I thought this was a pretty astonishing statistic, actually, when I was looking up some of the records. There have only been 14 147s in the tournament's history, and only 1 in a final, which was by Selby in 2023.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen this, Jack, but there's always this thing going around on social media these days about what's hardest, like a hole-in-one, a 147, or a 9-darter. And I'm
It's-
not
it's
dragging
not-
a hole-in-one
It's
in.
not one of those things. One of those things is wrong and shouldn't be in the debate. I've seen... I don't watch that much darts on TV, relatively speaking. I watch a bit, but not too much. I have seen plenty of 9-darters. I don't think I've ever been watching snooker when I've seen a 147. I've obviously been on YouTube and I've caught up on lots of highlights of it, particularly when done in 5.5 minutes by Mr. Ronnie O'Sullivan. But, yeah, no, it's not a 9-darter. Hole-in-one, though. Unless it's the par 3 contest at the Masters.
Yeah, or Augusta, where the two a penny there, apparently. But yeah, that's just absurd. It's clearly, on 147 is incredibly hard. It's not even possible sometimes because of where you end. Like, you know what I mean? Like a 9-darters, it's always on, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no way your opponent can stop you getting a 9-darter.
Yeah.
But there is a way. You're relying on if you're not breaking, you're relying on your opponent to break poorly. If you are breaking, you're relying on your opponent to hit a bad shot and set you up for that first shot. Don't get me wrong, from there it's an immense amount of skill, obviously, but and it is somewhat in your hands. But even then, there's so many things you have to do to create the openings, because you end up with the Red Bulls, all obviously they're set up in a triangle to start with. A lot of the times you have to produce a shot which will split them. So you have to hit a shot with power, so the ball goes in and the white ball cannons back into the bunch and splits them, and then gives you another red that you can pot, or set you up on a black you can pot. It takes an immense amount of skill to do that, and an immense amount of control to get the shot right, and to get the power, and to get the cannon right. So there's a lot of, as much as anything, you have to take 36 shots to get to a 147. Obviously, it's only 9 darts in a 9-darter. I'm sure
there's an element of randomness to everything you've just said there as well. Like, even when you're cannoning into the pack, like, that's skillful, but then it's chaos. Yeah, exactly. You can't control. You couldn't possibly do the Pythagoras necessary to figure out where all of those balls are going to go. I don't even know if Pythagoras is the right theory, but trying to sound funny with maths.
Back yourself, mate. You nailed it. You have to come to me with maths confirmation. Because I'm the engineer here.
Exactly. So, I mean, I don't know. We've digressed slightly, but that there is hopefully settled the 147 9-darter debate. Should we talk about the players? The main characters of this particular show?
I think so. I think before we start, I am gonna. You casually threw them off as if they were nothing. I'm gonna throw a bone for Joe Davis and Fred Davis, who are two brothers who simply between them dominated snooker until the 1960s. From the 1920s until the 1960s, virtually no one won anything apart from these two. So Joe was quite a lot older. I think it was about 12, 15 years between them. So Joe was the first champion. Joe never lost a professional game of snooker except against Fred. That's how good they were together.
Yeah, but they were the only two dudes playing it, probably.
No, there was plenty of... Well, okay. So obviously, yeah, the tournaments were smaller then. Often it was a winner-defends situation. So I'm not saying... So Joe Davis won 15 World Championships, which is obviously the record. And Fred was... a few behind. I think he was on about 7. Nevertheless, it is worth pointing out how they were the pioneers of the game. They obviously were so influential, so dominant that there won't be a snooker player around today who hasn't second or third hand, whatever it might be, learned something off them. They helped sort of develop the concept of building breaks even as a thing, as opposed to just sort of potting and going along. And as simple as that sounds now, there's always got to be someone who's the first to do it. It's not that old a sport. And actually,
that's true.
As a sport, I feel like it's at a different place to a lot of other sports. If you compare it to golf as a comparison, if you think about how money exploded, it will sort of start building up certainly in snooker in the 80s, basically. That was a good 20, 25 years after golf did. And golf is a pretty conservative sport, generally speaking, and then compare that to other sports as well, football, baseball. It is a late developing sport. It's a sport that has taken off, not just in the television era, but specifically, and probably for obvious reasons, in the colour television era. So being able to see and differentiate the different balls on TV, it is a sport which is built up because of TV and because of the personalities involved. I think it is interesting. From a sort of sports history point of view, I think it is interesting.
The other thing that's fascinating about it is, as you say, it's kind of like elitism, and now it's very much like a working man's game. Like, there are like working men's clubs which are just dominated by snooker tables and stuff. Like that transition is unrivaled, really, in many ways.
It's a game that was literally created by army officers in India in the 1870s. Obviously developed from billiards and previously existing similar games, but it couldn't be more upper class if it tried its origins, as a lot of sports are, but as a lot of sports do, football, rugby league being examples, it's been taken over by the working class, like working men's clubs with snooker tables and darts boards. It's as classic as anything else. It's a great thing, and it's not an expensive game to play, really. As long as you've got access to the tables, the equipments, buy yourself a cue. It's not the most expensive thing in the world. You can certainly save up and buy one if you need to. And if you're talented,
on the other hand,
people will pay you to come and play in those venues as well.
Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, a snooker table is not a cheap item.
Not to have in your living room, to be fair. In fact, even to be able to afford a living room big enough to fit it in would probably be mean you're doing quite well for yourself. But no, certainly, as I say, if you are playing if you've got access to it in a working men's club and you're good enough, eventually you won't have to pay for it either. People will start challenging you, you'll start making money out of it. It's an accessible sport compared to other sports. You don't need professional coaching to quite the same level to get going. You don't need expensive equipment like you might do in other sports.
Cricket.
Other famous British sports. Cricket, hockey, anything like rowing or obviously equestrian sports, things like that, which British people tend to do so well. Yeah, it's not elitist. It is a sport.
You also don't need the waistcoat to go training either. Which we should probably actually point. We should make that clear. Actually, like you basically have to dress up to the nines to play snooker at the World Championships. Like, don't let the riffraff in there.
No, bow tie and waistcoat is standard attire.
Yeah,
the occasional open collared shirt, but usually from people like Alex Higgins who are a little bit, not the best followers of rules.
Well, that kind of brings us nicely back round to the players. Nicely
done, Jack. Let's go. There we go. I'm going to just quickly, because I was talking about Fred Davis before. Firstly, Fred Davis won 8 World Championships, not 7. Small correction. Secondly, and this is incredible, bearing in mind these are people who were playing in the 30s and 40s, he retired as a professional in 1993 when he was 79 years old, which is pretty impressive.
That is impressive, to be fair.
Yeah. And that was only due to arthritis in his left knee.
Oh, would have kept going otherwise.
He kept going, yeah. He died in 1998 in the end.
Oh. Well, yeah, that is a good story. Great longevity as well, but there we are. The other players. Well, like in the abstract, the monikers first, Jack. The nicknames.
Famous.
We touched on a few of them in the intro. Not every player gets one, but most, right? Like I would say these days.
Yeah, there's certainly some classics.
Yeah, and I think we sort of previewed the really famous ones in the intro. The Warrior is the current champ, which is Kyron Wilson. And then you've got the Rocket, which is Ronnie O'Sullivan. The Nugget is Steve Davis. The King of the Crucible is Stephen Hendry. The Hurricane is your boy.
Hurricane. Alex Higgins, yeah.
Yeah, and there's loads of them. The Jester is Mark Selby. But yeah, it's obviously largely a marketing thing when the game really took off in the 80s, and we'll come on to the reasons why shortly. But it's produced a series of proper personalities. It's kind of unique in that sense that some really colourful characters that have played snooker over the years. Some have been pretty controversial. Some have been absolute cult heroes. Some have been the people's champions, even though they've never really
you could
won
those
anything.
those three things you've just described could all just describe Alex Higgins. To be fair,
We might end up doing
cult hero.
Yeah, people's champ. Yeah, that's true.
People's
actually,
champ. Yeah,
we'll probably end up
not
doing
with,
a thing on
very much not without controversy, and definitely not without fair criticism to be placed on him. But certainly a character.
No, exactly. And then Jimmy White is another good one. Who's definitely
good
a people's
friend.
champ.
Good friends with Alex Higgins as well. There's some stories there, which again we may touch upon, but I think Alex Higgins is worthy of a deeper dive than we are. We have time to give him today. I think at some point in the future we will come and dive a bit more into Alex Higgins' life.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But I mean, like, to give people a good, like, an understanding of the kind of personalities we're talking about, is quite a few of them gone on to be like TV personalities and pundits, and some of the really big names from the 80s are still on TV today in the coverage for the modern, like, the championship coming up this week. And one of those is Steve Davis, the Nugget.
Indeed. Which is impressive for Steve Davis, because he was never known for being the most interesting man. In fact, he had quite the opposite reputation, but I find him quite an interesting pundit, if his voice is a little bit dour sometimes.
Yeah, he's kind of like he's like snooker's version of Alain Prost.
Yeah, he's steady and
methodical.
Methodical is a good word, yeah.
But I mean, We're sounding like he sort of stumbled his way through the 80s. The man dominated the 1980s.
He almost won every single tournament in the 80s. I mean, he didn't actually, but he won 6 out of 8 finals that he made in the 80s. So 6 out of the 10 years of the decade, he was a champion. He lost in 1985, which we will come to, and 1986. He missed out in the final in 1982, but that was to be expected because he won in 1981. And you don't win 2 years in a row once you've won your first.
No, you
as
do
we will
not.
come to.
That is the rule.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 1983 tournament was one of... It's actually probably not really famous for Davis's win.
No.
Weirdly. There's a lot went on in the 83 final. 83 tournament,
He wasn't the story of the tournament, put it that way. The story of the tournament was the runner-up. So Cliff Thorburn, Canadian, he did something that no one had done before in the tournament before, and very few people had done before at all. It's something which is becoming more common now, and something we have mentioned previously. It is score a 147 in a frame. As the first person ever to do it at the tournament, and he did so in his second round match. And it was so significant that the match at the adjacent table, which included one of his best mates, Bill Werbenick, the game stopped for the black, and both the players from the other game came over to watch. And at the end of it, there's an iconic image of Cliff Thorburn dropping to his knees in joy at the moment, then standing up and seeing his best mate there, big guy, Big Bill, standing there and embracing both him and his opponent on the day in a big old bear hug. It was a very, very nice moment.
Oh, that's cool.
But as he was lining it up, one of the most iconic British and underrated pieces of commentary ever in the history of the sport was made, where the commentator simply said, "Oh, good luck, mate." But then he landed it. So yeah, all is good.
That's understated. That's perfect. Not the only thing the game is famous for. That might have been enough for any other game to enter folklore, but more happened, didn't it, Jack?
Yeah. That same game would also be the latest finish ever in a World Championship game, finished at 3:51 a.m. in a final frame decider. So fair play to anyone who is still in the Crucible at the end there. If it was me and you, Ben, we'd still be there.
Oh, we would have still been there for sure. No one goes home early. It's like leaving before the final whistle in a football game. But yeah, like I think it was a final frame. Did you say final frame decider?
I said final frame decider, yeah.
Yeah, that's insane as well. Like, so the first ever 147, the latest ever finish, and a final frame decider. Like, you get your money's worth if you've gone to that game.
Yeah, certainly do.
And an iconic image and an iconic bit of commentary. I don't think they would have had it back in the day, but now you can listen to the dulcet tones of John Virgo and Ken Doherty in your ear with a radio piece whilst you're watching it in the auditorium, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that is cool. Fair enough. The tournament, obviously, Thorburn progressed to the final of that tournament, where unfortunately, in the hours before the final, him and his wife suffered a tragedy when his wife suffered a miscarriage. He was understandably affected to this, and Steve Davis won the final comfortably, 18-6 in the end. But I mean, as you say, though Davis was the winner, Thorburn is the man who's remembered in that tournament for all the right reasons. So
yeah, I mean, he went
history forever.
So he went second round final frame decider, semi-final final frame decider, and quarter-final final frame decider, and then had that happen to him. That, and his wife, obviously, that is a bum draw. But at least he's in the history books, which is
he was also the 1980 world champion as well. So a very good player and a successful player in his even before this, and he was runner-up as well in 1977. So very, very good player. His mate Bill Werbenik was an interesting guy as well. He was the grandson of Ukrainian immigrants who was famous for the amount he could drink. He was a big guy. He was known as Big Bill. He reportedly drank 6 pints before matches and then followed it up with 1 per frame. Werbenik did so to control a tremor in his Q arm, which was caused by hypoglycemia. He was eventually given a drug ban from the sport because he used a beta blocker, which has similar properties. Obviously stops those sort of tremors. He argued it was essential for him to play, which, given he had a medical condition, I think it may be a fair argument. But the
pre-therapeutic use exemptions.
Yeah, so the powers that be deemed it a banned substance, and they banned him at that point. Another slightly amusing story about him, or a slightly amusing story about him, was he once famously, as I mentioned, he was quite a big guy, and we've all been there from time to time when you're stretching a bit far and your pants split. So he was stretching across the table, and his trousers split, which naturally made his audience and opponents all laugh. But he saved face, though, by simply passing it off as a fart, which I think is a very classy move. So that was Bill Werbenik. Definitely a larger-than-life character. Bill Werbenik, as I mentioned, was Canadian. Cliff Thorburn, a Canadian as well. And apparently, they used to hustle pool together before they came to the United Kingdom, which was, I imagine they were quite successful. Probably.
Yes, I imagine they were quite good at that.
So Cliff Thorburn, he, as I mentioned, he won the World Championship in 1980. He is generally regarded as the first foreign player to have won it, because the 1952 tournament was won by Horace Lindrum, who was Australian, but is generally disregarded as almost every single other player due to play in the tournament boycotted the event, which led to that split and multiple tournaments in a row not being played, as you mentioned. He's also notable because on his arrival in the UK, Mr. Alex Higgins, who keeps getting a mention, challenged him to a £5 a frame game, even being generous enough to give Cliff Thorburn a head start. But apparently Cliff Thorburn won every single frame, and then Alex Higgins refused to pay up at the end of it. So
that
there you go.
Sounds like the Hurricane.
A lot of overlapping stories. He was, and these are our first drug stories, and I've got another one here. I say drugs are going to get mentioned. They're going to get more mentions in the future, but Cliff Thorburn was banned for 2 tournaments and fined £10,000 at the end of the 80s, 89, 90, I think it was, for having minute traces of cocaine in his system, which was ironically after a match against Jimmy White, who has admitted on multiple occasions to being quite partial to the white stuff himself. So there you go.
It's also starting to paint a picture of the 1980s snooker circuit.
I'm not sure it was just the snooker circuit, really, but the 1980s, there you go.
Well, yeah, I'm not really talking about
All
the
in the
cocaine.
wrong decade.
I'm talking about these dudes hustling people out of cash, taking cocaine, like getting themselves into various pickles.
I mean, although I've mentioned a couple of times where snooker authorities have obviously placed bans, suspensions, fines on people. I think they were quite lenient generally. I think some of the behaviour and some of the things you hear about, that some people, Alex Higgins being the probably main example of them, did not get lifetime bans is quite extraordinary. It was a wild time, and as I said, we could do a whole episode just on the wildness of snooker in the 80s. But let's Let's talk about the World Snooker Championships today, so let's keep it civil.
Yeah. And talking of the World Snooker Championships, the greatest snooker game ever played has been played
without a doubt
in the World Snooker Championships. Yeah, do you want me to take the lead?
Yeah.
And then chip in here though, Jack, because there is a lot to discuss.
I've watched the entirety of this last frame recently just to refresh myself a bit because it is so wonderful. But go ahead.
So this is 3 years before we were born. So unfortunately we weren't alive. But it's it is the greatest moment in this sport, and it happened to happen in the biggest tournament in the sport, in the biggest game in the sport. So a 1985 tournament is where we are, is our scene. It's called the Black Ball Final, and going into the final, Steve Davis was the hot favourite because he had won the last 3 tournaments that he'd played in. I think he was also double world champ at that point, having won in 83 and 84, having covered obviously the 83 final.
81, 83, 84. Yeah, so I think it was 3 times already at this point.
He was a 3-time champ, sorry. I think he had won the 3 tournaments going into the World Championships and was a 2-time defending champ, but a 3-time world champ overall. And he'd never lost a ranking event final. So in 82, he got knocked out in the semi-finals. So just to put Davis's dominance into perspective, that's it. He was the dominant force, and he was playing Dennis Taylor, and he'd beaten Dennis Taylor in the semis the year before, and had only lost to Taylor once in 9 encounters. Dennis Taylor was a very good player in his own right. He had made one previous final in 1979, but had lost, and so Davis, big favourite. That's kind of all I really needed to say, but I've given you the context. It started badly for Taylor as well, to be honest. Pretty badly. He went 8-0 down in the first session.
It's his first to 18, and he was 8-0 down. So there you go. Yeah,
and that is normally an unassailable lead, all the time. And in fact, Davis looked set to go 9-0 up, but missed a green, allowing Taylor to win it on the pink. And then somehow in the second session, Taylor rallied and was behind 9-7 in going into the end of the day. So overnight, I don't know. Literally, that's that. This story could end there, and that would be pretty cool. But it was a pretty attritional affair, and Taylor was basically just hanging on to the coattails of Davis throughout the rest of the game, really, just clawing back 2-frame deficits constantly. And I think Davis even had a 17-15 advantage going in to what would have been the final frame had Davis won it. It was first to 18.
So, match point, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So, basically, Davis leading the whole way. Taylor's pulled back in an astonishing gap and then just hung on and hung on. He did the same again at 17-15 and forced it to a final frame. And the final frame itself would last 68 minutes, so over an hour. And in the final frame, having trailed in frames and with such a big deficit,
it's incredible.
He was 62-44 down, with only the last 4 coloured balls left available on the table worth 22 points. So essentially, you need to pot them all.
62-44 down, 18 points down with 22 points left on the table. If he missed one of them and Davis pot one of them, the game's over. Yeah. It was all or nothing.
Exactly. And again, he manages to do that. He pots all the coloured balls bar the black.
Yeah, and then he's potted the last 3 balls. He is on the black ball. Only the black ball's remaining on the table, and he misses it. So he gives Davis a chance to win it, yes. And then Davis misses it, and that gives
so on and so forth,
and so on and so forth. There's none of them are bad misses. They're all difficult chances, slightly overcut, or a long pot which just doesn't quite nail. Eventually, Davis makes a small error, leaves the black ball in a very poor position, and you can hear the crowd. You can hear the anticipation of the moment, the buzz in that situation. Like Taylor in his glasses, wearing these almost comically oversized glasses, specifically designed for him to play snooker, with more above the eye than below the eye, so they look like they're on upside down. Lining up this shot, this sort of very remarkable looking man in this remarkable match, in this remarkable situation, with one black left to win it. He knocks it in, holds his cue above his head in celebration, and it is, honestly, if you watch any snooker, just get the end of that on, get the last sort of 10 minutes or so of that on, taking into account everything we've told you, taking into account the fact he was 8-0 down, and then he was always a couple behind, he's dragged himself back into it, and then basically being in a situation where he had to put every single ball
to win the tournament,
and then looked like he'd blown it, and then dragged himself back into it, and it's like...
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect. The way I describe it for anyone who's like a baseball fan, for example, is like hitting a walk-off grand slam when 3 behind in the bottom of the 9th in the World Series, Game 7. It's literally, it is everything on the line in that one moment.
Like being 0-2 as well, like 2 strikes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And having trailed the series as well, like by a couple of games, and then every point, and then getting yourself back into it. It is, honestly, it's everything that could possibly go into it.
It couldn't have been more closely contested, basically. Like, he wins 18-17. It's a 3-week tournament. Like, it goes down to literally the final black. Like, it literally cannot be closer. It's the first time that the tournament's ever been decided by in the final frame in the modern era. I think it's only ever happened 3 times, ever. So, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. And it is iconic in the United Kingdom for anyone who's a snooker fan. We've just told you something you already knew. Anyone who's probably a sports fan in the UK was probably aware of it or has seen it in, best of highlight shows, documentaries on the BBC about it. It was voted the 9th greatest sporting moment of all time in a Channel 4 poll. And Davis was so distraught, having lost the match in a grueling final, he could only muster just one-word answers in the post-match interview. And he
got panned for that as well, which is brutal. He
shouldn't have got panned. Like I say, the guy was dominant. I mean, obviously, we love an underdog story in this country.
Partial.
We absolutely do. We are partial to an underdog story, and we're partial to a comeback, and we're partial to anything where we're watching something where we know it's history. Everyone is. When you see history being written in front of your eyes, what else is sport about other than that? But this was an amazing moment.
But going in on Davis, the match lasted...
No, we're not going in on Davis.
No, I know we're not. I'm saying those that did go in on Davis.
Yes.
Like, the match lasted 14 hours, 50 minutes. It's the longest ever recorded in a best-of-35 frames match in a World Championship final when he had never lost a ranking final ever.
68 minutes.
Yeah,
68 minutes.
It finished at 20 past midnight. There were 18.5 million people watching it in the UK at the time, and this guy's heartbroken, and all the media could come up with miserable git.
So there's never been anything on television after midnight in the United Kingdom ever with more television viewers than this, which quite impressive, really.
Yeah, like it's
think about the big sports events that have gone on long. Think about the New Year's or anything like that. Think about any news stories that are sort of ongoing. General elections, which tend to go after midnight. Yeah. No, people care about the snooker more.
Yeah, way more, man.
It's iconic.
Like I mean, there have been Olympic Games that have gone on in the middle of the night here, like depending on where they've been hosted.
Yeah,
it's never surpassed the snooker.
And it probably never will. Not in this modern age.
Not unless there's a World Cup final in football that we happen to somehow win, being played at 3 a.m. somewhere.
Yeah.
Is that even possible? I don't even know.
It's unlikely that they would schedule it at such an awkward time for Europe, even if it was in Australia. I mean, if you remember
Japan.
The 2003 Rugby World Cup final, I think that was something like a 9:30 a.m. kickoff for us, but that was played quite late, like 8 p.m. or something, or 8:30 or whatever it was in Sydney. I think it was Sydney.
2003. Who could forget?
Johnny Wilkinson.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else to. I don't even know how to close this section because it's so damn good. I mean, I guess the way to do it is to
talk about the only two players better than Steve Davis.
Well, yeah, I mean, very quickly, I was just going to add, like, Taylor doesn't defend his title because of the Crucible curse, so he gets knocked out in the first round, I think, the following year, and he wouldn't actually make another world final. But I mean, who cares? Like, he won the best one. He's also like a cult hero. He's an icon. He's a snooker icon, isn't he? And he's fronted TV coverage with John Virgo and other big sports. Not sports, snooker personalities over the years. And Davis is like regarded as one of the greats of the game. For a long time was considered I say for a long time, actually it wasn't that long, was it? Because someone else came along who we're about to talk about. But he's considered one of the greats, and he's now a TV personality alongside John Parrott, who he demolished 18-3 in 1989.
Yeah, just one last word on Dennis Taylor. So Dennis Taylor, Northern Irishman, one of the two particularly famous Northern Irish snooker players, as well as Alex Higgins. And it's probably worth pointing out that Alex Higgins was once given a 1.5-year ban for saying that he was going to shoot or get Dennis Taylor shot. I keep slipping in little bits and pieces about.
But that's
Alex
not
Higgins.
an idle threat in the 80s.
No, and it was taken seriously. However, it should be pointed out that Higgins and Taylor did make up after that.
That's nice.
Indeed.
After threatening to shoot him.
Oh, Alex Higgins,
Yeah.
We'll come to him.
We will come to him. But yeah, you did say that there were two others that have surpassed Davis, who are worthy of at least a footnote to this episode.
Yeah, Davis was the king of the 80s, and we'll talk about the king of the 90s and the king of the Crucible indeed next, and then we'll get on to the man that I think you and I both like the most, if we're honest, at the end. So next up is the king of the Crucible, the man who dominated the 1990s, Stephen Hendry.
Yeah, like not dissimilar to Davis in many ways. Like not a flamboyant champion.
Very calm, very cool, very young as well. When he burst onto the scene, he was 21, I think, when he won his first World Championship.
Yeah, youngest ever. Yeah,
youngest ever. Yeah, he made 8 finals in the 90s. He made 8 out of 10 finals and won 7 of them.
Yeah,
and he won 5 consecutive finals between 1990 and 1994.
Beat Jimmy White in every single one.
Beating Jimmy White in every single one of them.
Jimmy White also lost to Davis in '83. Like he lost 6 finals. Heartbreaking stuff. Possibly the most. I know we're digressing again, but possibly the unluckiest man in World Championship history.
Yeah, and if there's no way you can talk in depth about Alex Higgins without talking about Jimmy White. They were very good friends, and Jimmy White has some very interesting stories, but also some very wonderful things to say about Alex Higgins. We'll come to that one day, I'm sure.
Chomping at the bit, can't resist getting back onto Higgins. I don't know. I mean, like, I guess all you need to really say about Hendry, because we can't labour it as much as we did the 85 final, is he obviously came along pretty shortly after Davis, but people didn't think that they were going to see someone better than Davis. And then Hendry came along and dominated even more severely than Davis had managed over the course of the next decade. We'll come on to Ronnie in a minute, but Hendry's dominance over such a short period of time still means that he's often heavily argued for as being the best ever. Because Ronnie has never really sustained a period of dominance for a variety of different reasons, including his own personal demons. But Hendry didn't have that problem. He was a model pro and just swept everything before him in the 90s.
I am actually going to immediately make one correction because I was confused by that, because you said he won 5 consecutive finals between 1990 and 1994, but he can't have done, because he can't have won 1991 if he won 1990 for the first time, because then the curse wouldn't have worked.
That's true.
John Parrott won in 1991, but Jimmy White did lose that as well. So Hendry won six finals in 5 years between 1990 and 1996, with John Parrott winning in 1991, because the curse of the Crucible is reigning champion, first-time champion never defends
defends
their trophy.
Yeah, well spotted.
Kyron Wilson, do not bet on him this year.
Yeah, that would be an error.
Mm.
Yeah, well, no, mate, well spotted. I got carried away with Jimmy White being like the unluckiest man ever. But of course...
It's still true.
Yeah. But yes, Hendry still destroyed everyone. That's the point that we were simply trying to emphasise. But the final...
He did in some of those finals as well. He really did. 18-5 against Jimmy White in 1993. Comfortable.
That's a seamless transition really to Ronnie, because out of his 7 titles, I think he's dismantled 4 of his opponents quite heavily in those finals. But do you want to talk about the Rocket?
I think we both can, because we talked about Tiger Woods obviously last week, and how Ben and I, and so many others, obviously not just Ben and me, so many in our generation, born in the sort of 80s, 90s, whenever it is, started watching golf because of Tiger Woods.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I would have a lot less affinity for snooker if it wasn't for Ronnie O'Sullivan. Ronnie O'Sullivan, when we're talking about Steve Davis and Stephen Hendry, methodical players, relatively slow, taking their time, obviously very talented, but it can be a very slow sport. It can be a very thoughtful sport. And then you've got Ronnie O'Sullivan, who is for good reason called the Rocket, who came onto the scene in 1997, who not only hit a 147 at a young age in 1997, he did it in 5 minutes and 8 seconds, which is it's hard to put into context how ridiculous that is, unless you sort of watch the sport. It's 36 balls in 5 minutes and 8 seconds. Mm-hmm. That is insane.
Yeah, it is insane, and I can give you some more context. Just remind our any listeners that we have that the final frame in 85 lasted 68 minutes. The whole frame, and Ronnie cleared up the table in 5 minutes and 8.
That is honestly just he's incredible. So that was at the World Championships as well. When he was how old would he have been there? I think he was born in 76, was he? He was young anyway.
He was very young. Yeah.
It was incredible. So what a way to announce yourself to the scene. And then he won his first final in, I think, 2001. I think he beat John Higgins in his first final in 2001.
John Higgins, the 4-time champ.
Yes.
Now. So, not an insignificant opponent.
Not an insignificant opponent at all. He backed up with wins 2004, 2008, 2012, 2013, 2020, and 2022. So it's longevity. He is he's certainly a maverick, and he's been very open with his struggles with enjoyment of the game, mental health, and his sort of commitment. But he's still going now at the age of he was 75. He was born, so he would have been 22 when he hit that 147. In fact, no, he'd been 21 because he's late in the year when he was born. But he's an incredible player. He's incredible to watch. He can pop balls with both hands.
Yeah, he's ambidextrous. That's like being able to play tennis. It's like having 2 forehands in tennis.
Essentially, yeah. And obviously, you're put in a difficult situation where you don't have a good angle with your stronger hand. Being able to use your weaker hand is hugely beneficial, and being able to be just as good with your weaker hand is mad. But yeah, most appearances in the tournament. He's the oldest winner, as we mentioned, when he won in 2022 at 46. He's also won 8 Masters titles and 8 UK Championships, which gives him 23 major titles. And bear in mind, there's only 3 major tournaments in snooker, the Triple Crown events, essentially. It is an incredible record, and I don't think we need a GOAT debate, because I think we know who we're going to say if it is one.
Yeah,
Ronnie's on man. 41
ranking titles as well. 1,200 centuries, which is basically it's a 147's your holy grail. Just to put this into context for anyone who's not familiar with the sport, if you can't get a 147, the next best thing you can do is score a century, and so he's racked up 1,200 of those over the course of his career. and he's got 15 147s. Both of those are records, along with his 41 ranking titles and his 23 Triple Crown tournaments. So he's good. He's very, very good at this game.
He is.
I think Novak Djokovic is on record as having said that he only watches snooker because of Ronnie. So, aura, influence.
He's very, even to this day, he's very entertaining to watch. His interviews are very honest. He's a perfectionist. He's very highly self-critical, to the point where people are often amazed at how someone with his record and his level of success can criticise himself. Even in victory, he's critical about himself. But yeah, he's had issues in the past with drugs, with depression. But he's
also had a checkered upbringing. His father was convicted of murder and was serving when he was young. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I say checkered upbringing. I'm doing Ronnie a disservice there. I don't know anything about his family life, but his father was convicted of murder when he was a boy, and so wasn't around. And I think Ronnie played quite a pivotal role in his sister's life and vice versa. So, yeah, and a really interesting guy, and makes his success all the more remarkable in many ways.
Yeah, very interesting. But yeah, Ronnie O'Sullivan, he's mercurial, he's a maverick. Like others we've discussed, he's a flawed genius, and he has been very open about his own struggles, as he's occasionally flirted and perhaps even occasionally strayed across the line in terms of his behaviour. But he is a wonderful snooker player to watch, and he is iconic to anyone of our generation. He is what we've grown up watching, and you'd always be excited to see him on TV because you knew something could happen at any minute.
Yeah,
great player.
And I think we're still waiting to find out if he's going to this year's tournament at the time of recording.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, he's got an insane longevity as well. I think he's in most appearances at the Crucible. So, if he can go, he will go, despite all those difficulties that Jack's just summarised.
I'm sure he will. Yeah. So, speaking of the tournament, Ben, if you would like to watch the tournament, where can you watch it?
Well, the UK is very easy. It's just live across the BBC, basically.
It is. It always is, which will be on the website as well, so you can't miss it. Every
game, basically, is on the BBC. If you're not here in the British Isles, then I think your best place for finding it will be Eurosport and Discovery Plus, who I think have rights for the next few years as well and have shown it in the past. I can't remember if Eurosport show every game now, or if they show extended highlights, but you can find it there.
Yes, you will be able to follow along.
Where are we going next week then, Jack? If we've covered everything we want to cover in the World Snooker Championships.
I think we have. So next week we will be going to a different continent, a different country, a very different event, a very specific event within the sport, which I'm very interested in. Ben and I are both big fans of the National Football League, of American football, and next week is the NFL draft. So we'll be taking you there. We'll take you through all the process, all the stories behind it, and all the history of it, as always. So
some of the great first round picks,
and some of the less great first round picks as well. Which I think there's actually more of the latter than there is of the former, but or certainly more stories related. But
and
we'll get to it,
Jack. Some of the great late picks.
Indeed, and there's certainly a few of them to choose from. So yeah, we'll see you there. We'll see you for that one, and awesome. I'll see you later.
Yeah, see you in a bit. Bye, Jack.
Bye, Ben. Once again, thank you for listening. This was the Sporting Almanac podcast. If you enjoyed us, give us a like, a subscribe, or a rating at wherever you get your podcasts from, or more importantly, tell your friends. There's no better advertising than word of mouth. Our theme tune is Oh Yeah by Harmonia Productions. You can find us on Blue Sky at The Sporting Almanac, or drop us an email at thesportingalmanacpodcast@gmail.com. We're always up for episode suggestions or hearing any cool stories you've got. We'll be back next week, and until then, stay curious. Sport is nothing without the stories that make it. Goodbye.